and this is where they do their group photos. This is also where the president is inaugurated. And if you watched my Eyes Wide Shut Esoteric breakdown, then you will be familiar with the staff Ishtar, the 8-pointed star that was associated with the Venusian goddess of the Near East that we see here as well. It shouldn't be a surprise that many of these occult orders actually worship the same archetype, because Ishtar's planet was Venus, and Venus in Roman times was known as Lucifer. And Venus rules worldly success, finances, right? That is what this order is after, right? This order is after worldly success, dominance, power, luxury, and wealth. And that is, of course, what the global elite are after as well. So just as the secret society and Eyes Wide Shut have the 8-pointed star of Ishtar as the key part of their symbolic identity, likewise is the case with Ares, where we have the 8-pointed star at top of the podium. These orders seek to align with the fallen aspect of Lucifer, the Sitra Achra. The Sitra Achra means the other side. So it's both a place and a being. It's said to be ruled by Samael, who is very much equated with Satan. And Sitra Achra is a parasitic power that cannot survive on its own. Right? It doesn't have an internal spiritual life and center to draw from. So it has to steal and suck the spiritual energy of beings with souls.
Wij betreden het onderbewuste van Jacob Krud op 6. Wij eren de stroom, wij weren Baal.
But what they're doing is that they're moving into that, but not too close, right? They honor the streams, but they resist Baal. They resist this vortex, right? So they're moving into the sort of intra-psychic event horizon.
Hoe bedoel je?
En we weten een beetje hoe die feestjes bij de hoog zijn.
Party time. And here we have Joost, the president of Ares and partner of Carmen, who's standing here in the back wearing white. And Joost was the guy who initiated the new members into this elite underworld of Amsterdam. So archetypally speaking, that would make him a very Hades-like figure, which is interesting because we have the pomegranate behind him, and we have pomegranates on all the breakfast tables. And if you're familiar with Greek mythology, this show is highly Greek mythology coded, as the name Ares betrays, right? Ares being the Greek name for Mars. Then you might be aware of the story of Persephone and Hades, where we have Persephone being abducted by Hades, taken into the underworld. And when Zeus demands that she returns to her mother, Hades says, you know what, let me just have her for one more night. Can you do that at least for me, brother? Just one more night, and then I'll never see her again. Zeus is like, okay, bro, you hit that one more time. Yeah, you just enjoy yourself. And then Hades, of course, has a plan with that. He gives her a pomegranate. She eats 6 of the seeds, and because of that, she has to remain in the underworld for half of the year. And that's how the seasons are explained on the more sort of mundane level of analysis of the myth. So the pomegranate is said to grow in the underworld or be associated with the underworld in Greek mythology. And if you eat something that is growing in the underworld, you will forever belong, at least partially, to the underworld.
Jullie krijgen een eigen kamer. Jullie hebben een volledige nieuwe garderobe. Zorgen voor jullie.
So the new members having pomegranates on the breakfast tables, to me, very much evoke that they're eating the food of the underworld, if you will, and thus belong to the elite underworld of the Netherlands. But Joost here is not just a Hades-like figure, right? Someone who initiates the new members into the elite underworld of the Netherlands. He's of course also a Martian figure, right? He represents Ares, so he's kind of like the general, if you will, of the new members. Okay, you got a new place to sleep, you gotta wear these uniforms, you gotta listen to what we say. So he's very much sort of like a commander of these new members, right? So he's both a Hades-like figure and an Ares/Mars type figure. And this archetypal connection between Mars and Hades in the character of Yost is very interesting, because there is archetypal mythological sort of basis and logic to it. Because if we go back to Mesopotamia, and just a brief thing about Mesopotamia, it's where the Greco-Roman Western world received basically everything from, right? Astronomy, agriculture, architecture, what have you, right? They received everything from Mesopotamia, including their mythology and pantheons and god systems. But unlike Greece and Rome, where you had some gods that were gods of many things, including Apollo, god of healing, truth, knowledge, athletics, beauty, and youth. You also had gods that were very specific, like Mars, god of battle, right? Hades, god of the underworld. But in ancient Mesopotamia, you sometimes saw gods combining some of these domains, some of these realms. So we have Ishtar, for instance. Ishtar was goddess of love and war. She was also mistress of beasts. And we see her being worshipped not in her holistic totality in Greece and Rome, but as separate deities representing these different aspects, right? So her love aspect was worshipped as Aphrodite Venus, her sort of battle aspect was worshipped as Athena, and then her wilderness aspect and connection to animals was worshipped as Artemis. And with Hades and Ares/Mars, we have the god Nergal. Now, Nergal was originally worshipped as a god of battle and death, but then he became associated with the underworld as well, with the ruler of the dead, right? So in ancient Mesopotamia, you had the god Nergal representing both Hades and Ares. I don't know if the creators of the show were aware of that, but they are essentially playing with this more holistic archetype. So when we look at Ares and we look at a figure like Yost, he's not just a purely Martian commander type figure, but also an underworld figure as well, as evoked by the pomegranate seeds and him being the initiator into this elite underworld of Ares.
Ik hef het glas. Op onze Novite. Op Ares.
So they enter the reception hall here, and this is the same place where the young woman from the prologue decided to call it alive. And this is where they do their group photos, and this is also where the president is inaugurated. And if you watched my Eyes Wide Shut Esoteric breakdown, then you will be familiar with the staff Ishtar, the 8-pointed star that was associated with the Venusian goddess of the Near East that we see here as well. It might not be this symbol, it could be coincidental. I don't think it is. It shouldn't be a surprise that many of these occult orders actually worship the same archetype, because Ishtar's planet was Venus, and Venus in Roman times was known as Lucifer. And Venus rules worldly success, finances, right? And that is, of course, what we see here. We have an order that is basically makes up the financial elite, or at least a very significant portion of the financial elite. Like the VOC, they're after money and power and luxury and basically just sort of earthy, worldly success, right, and power. So just as the secret society in Eyes Wide Shut have the 8-pointed star of Ishtar as the key part of their symbolic identity, likewise is the case with Ares, where we have the 8-pointed star at top of the podium. This is a symbol pointing to Ishtar, whose planet was Venus. Venus was called Lucifer in Roman times, right? And Venus rules worldly success, finance. And that is what this order is after, right? This order is after worldly success, dominance, power, luxury, and wealth, yeah? And that is, of course, what the global elite are after as well, right? They want to rule this world, right? So just as Satan, Lucifer, is called the ruler of this world, likewise, these orders seek to align with the fallen aspect of Lucifer. They don't align with the higher aspect of Lucifer, the higher Sophia. They align with the lower Sophia, the earthy goddess power, and they don't seek to raise that goddess power into the higher levels of consciousness. They seek to keep her trapped down here with them so that they can be infused by her Shaktic power, her serpent power, what is called our chaos, the prima materia in alchemy. They don't want to raise this up to its pre-fallen state. They want it down here so that they can use this power to infuse their endeavor of global dominance. They're not aligning with Venus when Venus is high in the sky, because Venus is a very volatile planet. Sometimes you'll see Venus very high in the sky, basically at the level of Jupiter. Other times you will see Venus descending all the way to the horizon and of course beneath it as well. And that is why Venus was associated with Lucifer, because it mirrors this rise and descent of the serpent power of the universe, right? Ideally, this serpent power would circulate, right? It would descend down here to invigorate the world, and then it would rise back again, right? To keep the circularity going, right? But in the fallen world that we live in now, this serpent power is not made to rise into the higher levels. And that's why the so-called elite, which indeed shouldn't be called the elite, right? Because they're actually very lowly. That's why they don't want you or anyone else to become spiritually elevated. They don't want you to be successful in your alchemical endeavor of raising the serpent power all the way back from whence she fell, right? Because if you do that, you become aware, you become awake, you become truly elite. You become emotionally elite, mentally elite, intellectually elite, spiritually elite. They don't want that. The only reason they are elite is because they are managing to keep people in a very low state. And in this lower state, they are indeed the stronger power, because they have created a system of control that they control. And they do that by keeping the serpent power trapped and by using it to empower their endeavor of global control. So now we have Jacob being taken into an inner chamber of Ares, and we see here that this room is not blue, no blue to be seen at all. We have red carpet, red walls. So this to me evokes the true color of the order, which is not the blue of Hesed, of Jupiter, of loving kindness and generosity, but the red of Mars, of Jevera, of strength, of power, which of course they exert towards global or at least domestic dominance, right? Here we have Carmen taking Rosa to the hospital because her mother actually tried to off herself the night before. And she was supposed to have been at home to watch her, but she was being initiated into Ares, so she couldn't live up to her family duties, right? So we've seen this conflict between her family duties and family life and connections with the normal world, and then this enmeshment with the esoteric elitism of the Netherlands.
Wij betreden het onderbewuste van Jacob Crude op 6.
And Jacob, meanwhile, is being taken through a sort of depth psychology journey into his own subconscious.
Wij eren de stroom, wij weren Baal.
And they say here that we honor the flow, we resist Baal. Baal is the egregore that the order is not worshipping, but that the egregore that the order is feeding and that they're trying to keep at bay.
Wist jij dat ons initiatieritueel nog veel ouder is dan Ares zelf?
Nee, wist ik niet.
And they have to sacrifice to this power, and they do this partially through the initiation ritual.
Vertel Baal uw grootste geheim.
So we hear that this power was kind of stirring, but then the initiation ritual kind of helped keep it at bay, or sort of satisfy it.
Joost, nu jij op ons niveau meedraait, eis ik absolute eerlijkheid. Hoe boos was het?
Het was even wat onrustig beneden.
Maar je had gelijk, het ritueel, dat hielp enorm.
En zolang wij het blijven voeden, is er niks aan de hand.
Egregores function in the following way. They are collective thought forms that are created by and sustained by the collective mental energy of a group of people. It could be any energy. It could be the outrage that the Egregore of a media outlet receives. It could be the energy of submission that some religions have. So they feed that Egregore. In this case, it's a different type of energy. We will get into that. But for now, we can conclude that this being is deeply connected with the subconscious of the members.
Voel je je eenzaam?
Soms.
Voel je je eenzaam nu?
While we're talking about egregores, I might as well mention the egregore to rule them all, the great egregore, and that is what the Kabbalists call the Sitra Achra. The Sitra Achra means the other side, so it's both a place and a being. It's said to be ruled by Samael, who is very much equated with Satan. And Sitra Achra is a parasitic power that cannot survive on its own, right? It doesn't have an internal spiritual life and center to draw from, so it has to steal and suck the spiritual energy of beings with souls. But it cannot eat, if you will, higher frequency energy. It can only eat lower frequency energy. So that is essentially what we're dealing with here. We're dealing with the Sitra Achra, sort of localized within the secret society context of Ares. And that is what we're dealing with here. So basically they're entering the Sitra Achra within Jacob himself, because we are all partially kind of being sucked a little dry by this being, insofar as we are connected with our ego, right? Insofar as we are separate from the upper divine, which most of us are to a degree, we are all partially under the domain of the Sitra Achra, unfortunately. And actually, the Kabbalists would say that the reason why we are here is to liberate spiritual energy from the darkness of the Sitra Achra. And the moment the last spiritual particle has been liberated from its exile in the other side, that's when the Sitra Achra dies. And that is where we have unity between the physical world, Malkut, and the spiritual world, the Ein Sof, which access this world through Keter.
Wat wil je veranderen?
Alles. Mijn ouders, school, alle mensen, alles erbuiten, alle bullshit gewoon.
So basically what they're doing is they are moving towards the Sitra Achra, and you can kind of see the deepest aspect of the Sitra Achra as being like a black hole. And if you move very close, you will get in contact with a lot of energy, like a lot of energy of suppressed and repressed fears and angers and frustrations and what have you, all this fallen energy that we often push away, right? So when we have something rise that is uncomfortable, we kind of push it down. But what they're doing is that they're moving into that, but not too close, right? They honor the streams, but they resist Baal. They resist this vortex, right? So they're moving into the sort of intra-psychic event horizon of Jacob's subconscious. So they're moving close, but not too close. They don't want him to fall in all the way. They want him to get close enough so that he starts feeling all his fear, all his anger, all his resentment, all his frustration.
Ik wil gewoon opnieuw beginnen.
Why do they do this? Well, if they were actually alchemists, they would seek to bring that to light, right? Through a conversation like this, through a depth psychology journey like this. And so basically what they're doing actually is the foundation for healing. They're bringing this into awareness, but instead of actually caretaking it and at least beginning a process of transmutation, of reintegration, they actually kind of reveal the wounds, not to heal them, but to poke at them, to irritate them and cause friction, psychological friction within Jacob.
Soms hulp te vragen.
Jacob, waarom ben je bang voor Ares?
Mijn vader was lid.
Zijn wij je vader?
Nee.
Had je je vader?
Ja.
Waarom accepteer je onze hulp niet?
Why do they do this? Well, they don't do it for sadistic delight. Maybe Marai, who's kind of smiling the more she's poking at him, maybe she gets some sort of like dirty high from it, but the main reason is not sadistic. The reason is way more functional than that, because dark societies like Ares are intimately aware of the dynamics of sort of the lower psychological realities. And they know that a soul at rest, it does not produce the same raw output as a soul in volatility, in chaos, in pain, in friction. They don't want their members to be happy, whole, tranquil people. They want them to be miserable. They want them to be disconnected. They want them to feel empty. They want them to feel sad. They want them to feel frustrated, so that they go out there into the world with a chip on their shoulder, with an emptiness that they want to fill, right? So they go out there, they try to, attain success, get money, all this stuff that can strengthen Ares as a dark, corrupt shadow organization, right? Because Ares is essentially a form of Sitra Achra. Oh, how wholesome, right? Nothing like a good group hug. Not claustrophobic and creepy at all. And that is the mark that she got the night before as the concluding part of the initiation ritual. They were all given a mark. This is something occult orders do to, well, kind of show that you are property of the order now, but it's also to actually create a form of portal to their inner world so that they can channel energy into their life and into the world, but also to connect to that inner world, if you will. And we see that with Ares, where the members have to basically connect with Baal, with this being, with this thought form, at the very foundation, at the very dark heart of the order. So that's the more esoteric reason why they're being branded.
Je hebt mij verrast.
Oké.
Je kan heel groot worden. Ik ben blij dat je aan onze kant staat.
And they actually see potential in Jacob exactly because he is in contact with his pain, with his frustration, etc. Because that's like the raw material that they, as shadow alchemists or anti-alchemists, that they can use, not in a sort of ascensionist way to lift up the energy, to activate the higher levels of being, but in a horizontal manner to dominate the chessboard of society. Because it is that pain, that chaos, as alchemists call it, that they can use as raw material for their ambitious enterprise of societal dominance. They're basically shadow alchemists, anti-alchemists. A real alchemist would seek to elevate and transmute and integrate this fallen energy, but they actually want to stir it so that they can stir the members into action and keep them miserable, so that they try to sort of solve that in a horizontal manner by going out there and attaining worldly power and sort of serve Ares in that capacity. But the real member that they're after is actually Rosa, for reasons that we shall get to later.
Waar ga je naartoe?
Je bedoelt, waar gaan wij naartoe?
Nu die Rosa nog.
Die gaat nou vanavond overstag.
Hoe bedoel je?
En we weten een beetje hoe die feestjes bij de hoog zijn.
Party time. Damn, that is one intimidating doorman right there. I'm sure nobody gets past him. And by the way, notice that none of the veteran members of Ares are wearing blue. This is very much a color of the new members. But here we have Carmen, very much dressed like a regent lady, right, harkening back to the regent families that ran the VOC, that ran the Netherlands, and that founded these societies to consolidate and continue their power into the present. But look at them, they're all dressed in black. That could evoke either that blue is the outer court new member color, or that they have all been sort of like besmudged or sort of blackened by their increasing enmeshment with Baal, with the Sitra Achra, with this corrupting influence at the foundation of the order. And then Carmen wearing white and black, or at least having like a nice proportion of white and black, could evoke that she has her feet in either camp, if you will, in the other side, the Sitra Achra, and in the world of spirit. Or it could just be that white and black evokes the Regent ladies.
Hey. Rosa, toch? Ja, Rosa Steenwijk.
Van de West-Friese Steenwijks.
Nee.
De familiebank, toch?
Dat je moeder niet thuis met een psychose stemmen.
Het is natuurlijk niks om je voor te schamen als je moeder. Ik schaam me nergens voor.
I'm not ashamed of anything, right? Shame plays a key role in the story. And speaking of the color black and the Sitra Achra and the corruption of the order, we have her literally puking black goo, it looks like, into the toilet. And here's Jacob. He looks super ready to party with the Amsterdam elite here.
Had je toch al waarschuwd? Hey, blik op mij, ja?
Just as Jacob in the Bible wrestled with an angel, so Jacob could have 6 wrestles with demons.
Wanneer heb je die vingers?
And remember, Joost is the president of Ares. Again, not a super high position, but is an access into the inner court of Ares, the secret society within the secret society of Ares. And what we're going to find out here is what he had to do to become a president and inner court member. Because to become an inner court member of Ares, to become part of the secret society within the secret society, you have to become president. And to become president, you have to undergo a specific ritual. Speaking of rituals, nothing that happens at this party is coincidental or random. We have Carmen here walking up to Rosa like, hey Rosa, I was looking for you. And then she has someone else give her a pill.
Ze heeft de beste pillen van het westelijk halfrond.
This is not just for shits and giggles, it's not just to give Rosa fun time, because recall that Carmen was tasked with initiating her. And recall in the previous episode how she spoke with Roderick about him having to do something, and then Roderick looking at Rosa for quite a long time after she became a member. And that is because Carmen is architecting a seduction of Rosa within this party right here.
Zie je zo.
So you see here, Roderick spots her, and now he steps into action and performs his part in this ritual that is taking place, dedicated to Rosa specifically to get her deeper into the order, right? So just like Jacob was taken into a red room, so Rosa is being taken into a red room, right? The real color of Ares. So this is all architected. This is not random. Roderick is basically doing exactly what Carmen wants him to do, and that is to seduce Rosa, to engage in some good old indoor Olympics. Right, he's like very serpentine, right? Like licking her and kissing her. So it's very much sort of like forbidden fruit type seduction here.
It's Rosa.
Meanwhile, Jacob is just desperately trying to cock block her, or cock and coochie block her. And I truly believe that Venus, Ishtar, in her sort of low aspect, is the true god and archetype that the order worships. And Venus, of course, has to do with seduction, has to do with sexual attraction and pleasure. So that's what they're using here to seduce Rosa and to further enmesh her in the order. He's like that one friend that can't find the other friend at the party and is trying to find them, meanwhile they're having some fun, you know? Speaking of fun, we have Arnold Borms getting a bit of nose candy, which of course is very common in the Netherlands. But while Carmen is the architect of this ritual, this sex ritual going on with Rosa, she's not privy to everything that is going on in Ares. She is the daughter of the head of Ares, She's very prominent amongst the student members, but she's not an inner court member. She has not been president, and the reason for this is that it is a very patriarchic order. It's only men, basically, that has become or even can become presidents. Not because they have like a formal rule against it, but they simply just select the men over the girls. So there is no women in the inner court, it's only men. So Carmen is not fully aware actually of what Ares is about. She of course knows it's highly elite and all that, but she's not knowledgeable about the deeper hidden aspects of the order.
Zullen we zo gaan?
Right, so they're all to some degree a pawn in a greater scheme. Roderick works for Carmen works for Dad levels to this. And we have all bombs just passed out in the hallway. Went pretty hard last night.
Even lekker douchen? Ja, kom.
Yeah, so Joost sort of were confronted with the ritual that he had to go through to become an Occult member. And because of that, he decided to call it a life. So this harkens back to the prologue that we saw where the young woman decided to opt herself as well.